all about writing with Ben and Sara.
Welcome to All About Writing, the podcast that covers everything about the world of writing from the inside out. This is episode 20, part 4 of our series on writing life. I'm Ben, here with my co-host Sara, who is an award-winning, best-selling author, screenwriter, editor, and TED Talk presenter.
And I'm Sara, here with my co-host Ben, who is an award-winning, best-selling author and ghostwriter, editor, and publisher. And today, we talk about writing life and kind of along the lines of, writer's block and scheduling yourself for writing, which we've talked about in the past. We're going to talk about the first draft. And our title of this is The First Draft is Crap, and that's something that we wanted to impart on everybody. Ben and I have written a lot of first drafts, some of which, at least in my experience, have been totally trashed, and started over on page one, blank page. But bottom line, and I think this is something we're both going to reiterate, is that you can't fix what's not written. So you have to write the first draft first, and you have to write it to have something to work on, to tweak, to work with an editor, to send to beta readers, to go paragraph by paragraph or read out loud, all of the things. But it's kind of like, it's not, you can't fix it if it, or don't fix it if it's not broke. It's like, you can't fix it if it's not built.
Mm-hmm. That's right. Absolutely. The thing about the first draft is it is just the first stab at this. It is not the final book. And that's something that a lot of first-time writers don't understand, is they feel that, I have to have it perfect the first time. No, you don't. In fact, it will never be perfect, and you shouldn't aim for that. What you're trying to do is just get all the thoughts that are in your head down onto the page. For anyone who's done a little bit of writing, you will really see how once something is on the page, it sort of becomes real to you. If it's just up in your head, it's kind of real, but it's not there yet. It's still just kind of rattling around. You have to get it onto the page, which is why the first draft is so important, just to get the basics down for what this book is. And you know what? Outlines are good, and if you're good at doing outlines, we recommend that you do them. Sometimes, though, you may not have just figured it out, and so you're just kind of exploring, and you're just kind of writing to see where it goes. That's okay, too. But whether you have an outline or you're just winging it, the key to a first draft is to keep moving forward. Don't spend a lot of time rereading what you've already done. Don't spend a lot of time correcting previous chapters and agonizing over words. Just recognize that you can always fix it. You can always go back later and fix it. But the key is to keep moving forward, because the more of the book you've got down on the page, the more you actually have to work with.
Yes. And I do think sometimes that's where that outline does come into help, because if you know what's coming next, you don't have to spend time rereading previous paragraphs or chapters to kind of get yourself back into, like, where was I? What's going on? And what's happening? And what were those loose ends I was going to keep tying together? That's why that outline is helpful. As someone who never used to outline, now that I do, especially since I do have a lot of things that I'm trying to keep in play in multiple books, I'm trying to remember what it's helpful just to save yourself that time, because you inevitably, going back, will start nitpicking word choices and redoing it, and suddenly that schedule you set for yourself, that time to write, is kind of frittered away on editing as opposed to continuing that first draft. And I think that's what we're trying to say, is just get it out, spit it out, put stuff on the page. Don't worry about how long it is. You might have to add or subtract. Don't worry about word choices even, or finding the exact right verb for that one sentence. And that's something I see a lot of writers talk about, how like they agonize over the structure of the sentence and the word choice, and you're just hurting yourself, because
that's right.
If it takes you too long to get that first draft out, you might run out of time, kind of, in a way, like out of passion or whatever it is.
And what you're describing, Sara, is not necessarily editing. Frankly, it's nitpicking. It's agonizing. Great word. It's agonizing. And I've seen many aspiring authors get stuck in this, where they just keep going back and trying to fix and fix and fix. Because sometimes just kind of agonizing over what you've already written is easier than writing new stuff. And fair enough. But if you want to get your book done, you have to keep moving forward. And you know what? Your ideas may change as you write the first draft. You know, maybe you had an outline, you had an idea what you wanted to do, but as you go, you realize that isn't really working. So I have this new idea. I want to try that. That's totally okay. That's what the first draft is for. I find when I'm writing, I always have an outline. I always have an idea of where I'm going. But inevitably, at some point, I realize, yeah, that isn't a good idea. This is a much better idea, because I discovered it while I was writing it. And while I was in there, and I was with my characters, and I was in the scene, and I saw organically what was actually making sense. And I have had stories take entire pivots in a single chapter because I realized what I had planned makes no sense for what my characters would have done. And that's totally okay. Your original idea was just the starting point. You know, and maybe your perception of the story changes as you're writing it. Maybe your characters, they come to life in unexpected ways, and they demand that you change the story. And I say go with it. You know, trust your creative instincts. And as you write the first draft, you may be changing the story as you go, in which case there's stuff behind you in earlier chapters that's going to have to be fixed to match your new story. Don't worry. Don't go back and fix it. Just make notes to yourself. I got to go back later in draft 2 and fix this and this and this, but I'm going to keep moving forward to see where this goes. Just make notes. And,
Yes.
Sorry, just one last point. I have many times salvaged a previous scene, even though my entire story has changed. Even if the entire point of view has changed, and I have to rewrite a scene from a different character's point of view. Keeping that scene is amazing how much work it can save you. It's amazing how little you have to change to make that scene still work with your new vision.
And to add on to that, though, like you're saying, what if there's a scene or a character that you fall in love with and you don't want to cut, right? And you're, you know, by spitting the whole draft out, though, and not having certain characters or scenes or expectations become so precious, words become so precious, it actually makes the editing process that much easier when you do have to go back, because you will have to edit multiple times, uncountable numbers of times. And if you haven't agonized, I'll use that word because I think it's such a great, I've seen it, you know, if you haven't put all of that time and effort into those words yet, they're a lot easier to cut or change or shift, because you're not looking at that sentence going, but I spent 5 minutes getting that sentence perfect. Well, you didn't. You spent 30 seconds, if that, writing that sentence. You don't care if it gets cut or shifted or changed, because you haven't invested yourself and you haven't put meaning behind that. And I know I brought this up in previous podcasts, but like I truly have had where my editor Craig came to me and he's like, this is the weakest thing you've ever written. And I had the entire book written, and 100,000 words, and I was like, fine. And I started all over again on an empty page 1 and sent him the first 100 pages, and then he was like, strongest thing so far you've had. But you know what? It was my first draft I was getting rid of, and I was able to salvage a lot of the stuff in that first draft, but it was rearranged, it was used differently, different people, everything was done. But because I wasn't married to it, it was just puke on a page at that point. I didn't care that I had to start over. You know, I cared. It took me like 2 days to sit and go, me. But then I was fine.
Yeah, that's exactly it. The first draft is just that. It's not the final story at all. It's your first attempt, and maybe you missed the mark and you got to go back. And you know, and don't get too attached to it. Basically, there will be gold in there. Don't be wrong. It's not like the whole first draft is crap. Just most of it. You know, and you will get those nuggets of gold as you go through it later. Once you finish the whole thing, and you know, this is actually the story I wanted to tell. Great. Okay. Well, what's relevant? Good. Okay. Yeah, that scene. Yeah, but I don't need that anymore. But that scene, I really kind of like it. And so I'm going to rework it so it fits in my new vision, whatever, right? Here's something, too, about writing the first draft. What do you do if you write yourself into a corner? Because that certainly can happen, especially if you don't have an outline and you're just kind of winging it, which is totally okay, by the way. But if you do that and you kind of find yourself, ooh, I don't know where to go from here, well, there's a couple of things you can do if you write yourself into a corner. Sometimes just push through the difficult chapter. It's not good. You know what you're writing is crap. You know that, but it doesn't matter. It's just the first draft. Get this scene down, finish it however you can, and move on to the next thing. And just know that whatever, that chapter sucks. I'm going to go back and rewrite it later. I don't know how, but I'll fix it later, right? But if you're not too attached to the first draft, you can do that. Sometimes you do just have to skip that chapter and move on to the next part in your story, and hopefully it'll make sense then. And then you'll get inspiration to go back and figure out what was going wrong with that part of the story. Okay, I can fix it now. And occasionally, if you write yourself into a corner, sometimes you just have to stop. You have to take a step back and re-examine where you are and where you want the story to go. And maybe if you've been diligently following your plan and you've got to a point now where you're like, oh, I don't know what to do with this now. Well, maybe you've gone down the wrong path and you got to back it up a little bit and turn the whole book this way and start walking down a different path. Maybe. Or maybe you just need to give it some thought and realize, okay, I'm in a conundrum here, but that's brilliant drama. I just have to figure out how to solve that conundrum, and then my characters will move forward, and it'll be like genius, right? I mean,
As long as you just don't make them magic. Just don't make them magic.
Yeah, exactly. No magic solutions. But I'm having that problem right now on the current project I'm working on, the next Space Pirates book. I had thought that I needed to do a certain thing with sort of a subplot. A subplot had to sort of track along this way in order to support the main plot. And I've just finished writing what was supposed to be one chapter, has now ballooned into 2 chapters. It's so big, and it's so just fat, and there's so much stuff, and there's so much talking, and I've introduced 2 new characters. And as I wrote it, I kind of just went with it organically, and okay, this new character, okay, you interact with the hero this way, and that's cool, and then this character's going to interact with the heroine this way, and okay, cool, well, that's kind of interesting, a little saucy, all right, there we go. I wrote it, and finished it, and went, what the hell am I doing? I've just wasted like 10,000 words of a 75,000 word book on a single scene, and I don't even know what I've accomplished with it. And so I had to just stop. I had to just stop and leave it for a little while. And I sat down with it the other day and looked at it and went, okay, I realize now that the little subplot that I was building, I actually don't need for the climax of the book at all. The book has kind of evolved. I don't need it at all. So I don't need either of those chapters that I've just written. I need about 10% of them. The 10% that I need, yes. But the rest of it, all those new characters I introduced, all those scenes I wrote, all the clothing I described, nah, don't need it. Well, it's gone, and we're going to keep going. And that is what the first draft should be like.
I also think, though, that we're forgetting the fact that you and I have been doing this for a very long time, and we know when we've gotten to that point, and we know how to self-police ourselves a little bit and say those things to ourselves, because I think that that's a skill. That's learned. That's not something that your first book. You certainly don't know it your first draft of your first book. And so I think I think the reassurance we're trying to give people is you're going to have those hard chapters. You're going to paint yourself in a corner. You're going to get stuck. You're going to kind of freeze at the keyboard and worry that it's all crap and it's all ridiculous. And what are you doing even attempting to write this novel? And I think what we want to tell people is that just get it out, finish it, write the words "the end," And then whether you self-police after that and you agonize over your word choice and you edit and you have your beta readers and you have your editors and you have, all of those people to kind of hopefully, honest people who aren't just, going to be single fat saying, good job, it's an amazing book because you finished it, but actually real people who can help you with the structure or with the outline or the back matter of the book, whatever it needs, but you're not going to be able to step back as easily in the beginning unless you're a prodigy, right? And go, oh, I can tell that this scene or this one chapter is superfluous and unnecessary and it's created trouble for me. Don't even worry about being able to see that in the beginning. It will come with practice and time once you get used to the pacing of your own writing and your own voice.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. And I guess, the key here is that, remember, just what we're saying is don't get too attached to the first draft.
Yes.
It's your first try, and some of it you're going to toss eventually. Some of it's gold, and some of it you're going to keep, but some of it you're going to rework, some of it you're going to completely rewrite, some of it you're probably going to just throw out and say, nah, that didn't work. That's okay. That's totally okay. And this is, I guess, what's really important for someone who's writing their first book, and I think, oh, they're so excited and they're so proud, and that is great, and you should be. But it's just the first draft. It will get better, And if you don't nail it on the first try, don't feel bad. None of us do. None of us nail it on the first try. We just plow forward and get the ideas down, and then when we look at what we've got, we look at the first draft and go, okay, here it is. I'm pleased with this, but there are ways to improve it, and I'm going to go back and fix it now. And that's exactly how it should be. So
that's the way it's been for centuries. Every writer has, multiple drafts, multiple titles, all of that. Everybody's gone through that. Nobody's immune to that. The only people who don't spend the time rewriting their first draft and editing their first draft are the people who smack together something and then self-publish it immediately without even, going back or having beta readers or having editors look at it. And I mean, you can do that. And I'm sure I'm speaking out of turn, and there's somebody out there who's like, I wrote my first draft and I self-published it and it's got sold tens of thousands of copies. And if so, awesome, you're the unicorn, bravo. But for the rest of us mere mortals, we're all going to work. I mean, a traditional publishing house, you go through, I don't even know how many renditions of your book. There's so many eyes on it and so many pencil marks on it. There's no such thing as publishing your first draft, or even your fifth, or maybe even your 10th. And that's the way it's supposed to be. It's not fast. It's never good. Even self-publishing is not fast in this part of the process. If you're doing it
absolutely,
carefully and I don't want to say properly, but a little bit, yeah.
Yeah, and so anyone who is thinking about self-publishing, good on you. Go for it. It's awesome.
Yes.
But make sure that you put in the time. Just because you finish your first draft doesn't mean you're done. That's just the first step. Now you got to go back and rework it and fix it, because your first draft is crap. And you want to make sure that your book is awesome. So make sure you go back, put in the effort, exactly like Sarah said. Get the beta readers, people that you trust, and eventually get professional help, with an editor and so on. But yeah, so it's a process, and it can be a very emotional process. It can be a very trying process. We know. We've been authors for a long time. We were first-time authors. We remember what it's like, and honestly, it doesn't change that much. There are times writing the first draft like, I suck. At the same times, yes, I'm the best ever. Right? The highs and the lows of the emotion.
Oh gosh, and we've been working together for a long time now, right? And there are times where you have, my book in hand, and you're like, we need to have a Zoom to discuss this latest book, and I'm like biting my nails. I'm breaking out in pimples. I'm like, oh my god, he hated it. I have to redo the whole thing. Like, it's still many, many books later we're both traditionally published too. Like, and we still have the same, like, with our drafts. So
Oh yeah. Oh
there's
yeah.
no.
Yeah, I mean,
I think the minute your ego is so big that you don't get anxious about those first drafts is when you're in trouble, because then it does mean that maybe you're gonna put out
yeah.
crap.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, I do remember once when I was the head of a publishing house, I had to call one of my authors, and this was the third book in his series, and it had been quite a successful series. He wrote spy thrillers, and I just emailed him and said, "Yeah, can we have a call? I just want to talk to you about the book." And so I got on the phone with him. I said, "How are you?" And he said, "Well, my publisher has called me to talk about the book, so I'm feeling pretty nervous right now." So yeah, and he totally picked up what I was putting down there. Like, yeah, we got some work to do here, but we did, and that's the thing about having an editor is that I could see things he couldn't see, and I said, okay, yeah, I see what you're doing here, but there's a whole bunch of this happening, and I need you to fix that. And he went, of course, yes, and he fixed it, and it was great, and on we went, and it was a great book, but yeah, yeah, no, it definitely it can take a lot out of you, and we get that. And you know, like we said earlier, just don't agonize over the first draft. Remember that the first draft is just that, and it's crap, and it will get better.
yes,
The second draft, the third draft, the final draft will be brilliant, but you got to go through the stages first to get there.
yes,
So,
yep,
that's kind of it. So,
that's it.
so
Yes,
yeah, that's our show for today, everyone. The first draft is crap, and we'll just leave it at that. But anyway, thank you for listening. Please don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss any of our chats, and do feel free to leave a review, which really does help us a lot. If anyone is looking for help with any aspect of their writing, like say a manuscript evaluation of your first draft, we recommend our friends at Cascadia Author Services. They're great folks. I've worked with them for years. They'll take good care of you, and you can find them at cascadiaauthorservices.com. And you can catch up with Sarah at sarahdahlman.com and on Instagram.
and you can find Ben at bennettrcoles.com as well as on Facebook and Instagram. Thank you again for joining us today, everybody. Please reach out if there are any topics you'd like us to cover, and we will see you again when we next chat all about writing.
This has been All About Writing with Ben and Sara.